It began like any other quiet morning in the Blue Ridge Mountains, mist clinging to the treetops, the sound of distant crows echoing through the valley, the faint hum of wind across Turtle Island Preserve. For 30 years, this land had been Eustace Conway's living testament to a forgotten America, a place where the past still breathed, and machines had no place. But beneath the log walls of his hand-built cabin, something ancient had been waiting, sealed off from the world. When environmental inspectors arrived to assess the soil stability beneath Eustace's home, they expected nothing more than damp clay and root webs. But the sensors told a different story. Beneath the cabin floor, nearly 10 feet down, was a hollow space that shouldn't have been there. At first, the crew assumed it was an air pocket caused by erosion. Then, a sharp thud of wood echoed as a probe struck something solid. They cleared away layers of slate and packed earth until the outline of a hatch began to emerge. Hand-hewn, sealed tight, and bound by rusted nails that hadn't seen sunlight in decades. The team paused, unsure whether to continue. When Eustace arrived, his face unreadable. He examined the spot for a long moment before finally saying, "Be careful what you dig up." Some things were built to stay quiet. Still, the work continued. The hinges groaned as the hatch lifted, releasing a cold breath of air from the earth, thick, damp, and almost metallic. Flashlights pierced the darkness below, revealing a ladder descending into a narrow passage. Dust swirled through the beam like ash. One of the inspectors muttered, "It's not natural. Someone built this." Eustace didn't answer. He just stared into the dark, as if recognizing something long forgotten. The investigators descended carefully, boots sinking into soft soil. What they found beneath the cabin wasn't an ordinary cellar, nor an accident of nature. It was deliberate, a space shaped by human hands, a secret that had waited patiently under the mountain, buried beneath the life of the man who claimed to need nothing but the land. And the deeper they went, the stranger it became. To understand what investigators stumbled upon beneath Eustace Conway's cabin, you have to understand the man who built it. For decades, Eustace wasn't just a name, he was a myth. They called him the last American man, a philosopher of dirt and pine who turned his back on electricity and built his world by hand. Deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, he carved out 1,000 acres of wilderness and called it Turtle Island Preserve, a living classroom where the modern world stopped at the gate. Here, students learned to tan hides, forge knives, track deer, and build fires from stone. No phones, no engines, no screens. Only the rhythm of wind and wood. To many, he was a relic. To others, a prophet. Eustace believed that survival wasn't about fear. It was about connection. "The earth doesn't belong to us," he often said. "We belong to it." For 30 years, that belief defined his every action. But those who worked alongside him noticed something changing in recent years. He grew quieter, more reclusive, as if his lessons had turned inward. He spoke of energy, of soil memory, of listening to what the land wanted to tell him. Apprentices recalled seeing him vanish into the woods for days, returning covered in dirt and ash, muttering about a project he was finishing in secret. No one questioned him. After all, Eustace was a man who thrived on mystery. But now, as inspectors dug beneath his cabin, the truth began to surface. Turtle Island had always been a place where the past was preserved. But beneath its heart, something even older was waiting. Something Eustace had been working on for years. And when that wooden hatch opened, the line between myth and man blurred forever. It began innocently. A routine environmental safety inspection ordered in early 2024 after reports of shifting ground near Turtle Island's main homestead. A recent rainstorm had caused minor flooding in the lower pastures, and officials wanted to ensure the cabin's foundation was stable. But stability was never Eustace Conway's concern. He built his life on controlled chaos, And this time, the ground itself was keeping his secret. As a team of 3 inspectors began their scan, the equipment started to misread, detecting not bedrock but empty space beneath the cabin's southern wall. One of the men joked about buried treasure. But when the reading held steady, laughter turned to silence. They dug a small test pit and uncovered a section of timber bracing that didn't match the cabin's age. Eustace watched quietly as they uncovered more, until a flat piece of slate gave way to the edge of a handmade hatch, sealed with wax and rope, reinforced by nails hand-forged decades ago. One inspector turned to Eustace and asked, "Did you build this?" Eustace's answer was as cryptic as it was chilling. "Not recently." By law, they had to investigate further. Eustace didn't stop them. He only gave a single warning. What's under there isn't danger, it's memory. When they finally pried open the hatch, a cold breath of air rose up. Still, heavy, untouched by sunlight for perhaps half a century. The flashlight beams revealed a wooden ladder leading into darkness. No wiring, no stone, just dirt walls carved smooth by hand. They climbed down, one by one. The silence was absolute. Not even the forest above seemed to breathe. When the last man reached the floor, his light swept across something that froze them all. The walls weren't just dirt. They were built, reinforced with timber and clay, carved with markings that looked deliberate. Someone had lived here. Someone had planned this. And that someone was standing right above them. The deeper they explored, the more impossible it became. The chamber stretched roughly 30 feet across. A hand-dug masterpiece supported by beams of chestnut and oak, wood extinct from modern use. The air was still, cool, almost sacred. The scent was a strange mix of oil, leather, and old earth. Along one wall sat shelves carved directly into the clay, stacked with glass jars, dried herbs, and parchment rolls wrapped in twine. In another corner, a simple wooden cot rested beside a table made from reclaimed barnwood. Everything was primitive, yet precise, like a craftsman's museum frozen in time. A single lantern hung from the ceiling, its wick long dry. Nearby sat an iron kettle, a hand-forged knife, and a row of clay pots labeled with faint charcoal handwriting. Beans, salt, ash. Nothing about this space suggested fear. It wasn't built as a panic bunker or fallout shelter. It felt intentional, thoughtful. Then, one of the investigators noticed something unusual near the far wall. A crude ventilation shaft, fashioned from hollowed saplings tied with cord. The design was ingenious, creating natural airflow. A pulley system attached to the ceiling turned a small wooden fan, powered by a counterweight filled with stones. "It's like he engineered it without tools," one inspector whispered. They took photos, cataloged each object, careful not to disturb anything. Eustace stood at the hatch above, silent, watching. When they asked him what this was, he simply said, "A study, a place to remember what man forgot." But then came the discovery that changed everything. A stack of leather-bound journals, carefully wrapped in cloth and sealed inside a wooden chest. That's when they realized they hadn't found just a survivalist's hideout. They had uncovered a record. A record of a man trying to live beneath the surface of the world, to understand it, maybe even to outlast it. And what those pages contained would redefine who Eustace Conway really was. When investigators carefully opened the chest, a wave of musty air escaped. The scent of ink, age, and oil. Inside were leather-bound notebooks, hand-stitched and weathered by time. The first page bore a simple inscription: "If the world forgets how to live, I'll teach it again, from beneath the roots." The journals spanned decades, each one filled with sketches, charts, and passages written in Eustace Conway's distinctive looping handwriting. At first, the entries read like field notes: temperature readings, soil moisture levels, humidity data, but as they continued, they became something deeper. Meditations on isolation, on self-reliance, on the human need to reconnect with the earth. One entry read, "I came down here to see how long a man can live on what he remembers. The air is different under the soil. It feels like truth." Investigators began to understand this was no bunker, no survival shelter. It was a laboratory of the human spirit. He wasn't hiding from collapse. He was testing what it meant to survive without society. Among the pages were notes about sound, how the forest's heartbeat could still be felt underground. There were experiments on storing energy through motion, water condensation techniques, and diagrams showing cycles of air and light. But one entry caught particular attention. "The earth breathes slower than man. To learn from it, you must become part of it." Some inspectors later described the moment as haunting, as if they were reading the thoughts of a man who had lived both above and below the world at once. The journals were proof that Eustace's philosophy wasn't just performance. It was a lifelong experiment in reconnection. Yet even with all that insight, the most disturbing discovery still lay ahead. Because behind those journals, carved into the back wall, was something sealed, something deliberately kept from the light. And when they found what was hidden there, even Eustace himself hesitated to speak. In the dim light of their flashlights, investigators discovered an adjoining compartment, accessible through a narrow earthen tunnel. What lay beyond blurred the line between primitive and genius. Along the walls were mechanical contraptions built from scavenged parts, pulleys made of carved wood, gears shaped from melted scrap metal, and a makeshift hydro pump connected to a small underground stream. At first glance, it looked like the remnants of some forgotten workshop, but when one inspector rotated the hand crank on a nearby flywheel, the air stirred, faintly, yet unmistakably. It powered a tiny fan. Another device, half submerged in the stream, appeared to convert flowing water into rotary motion. This wasn't random tinkering. It was engineering in its purest form. Innovation stripped of technology. The kind of invention born not in laboratories, but in solitude. Pinned to one wall was a sheet of parchment labeled "Continuity of Function Without Dependency." It outlined a system of perpetual utility, how energy, motion, and survival could coexist without fuel or electricity. In the margins, a note read, "Technology should serve life, not replace it." Experts later called it analog sustainability, an attempt to prove civilization didn't need progress to thrive. Everything worked in balance: gravity, water, air, muscle. Eustace had built his own world, a living ecosystem beneath his cabin, untouched by modern hands. One investigator, a veteran of disaster response work, summed it up perfectly. It's not a doomsday shelter. It's a time capsule for when the rest of us forget how to build things that last. But as they continued deeper, one section of the tunnel stood out, reinforced with heavier timber, sealed by an iron-banded door. Its surface was etched with unfamiliar markings. Symbols, circles, and hand-carved letters faded almost beyond recognition. When they asked what was inside, Eustace replied quietly, "That room's for when the world ends." And the air grew cold as he reached for the latch. The iron hinges groaned as the door creaked open, releasing a low rush of air. A faint glow from bioluminescent moss clung to the walls like green fire, casting light across a space smaller but stranger than anything they'd seen before. Inside were shelves lined with glass jars, not filled with food or seeds this time, but soil samples, each labeled by date, altitude, and moisture content. Notebooks lay open on a table carved from rough pine, their pages covered in data and sketches of plants sprouting in total darkness. A faint hum came from a corner where vines, somehow alive, crept along the earthen wall. Nearby, Eustace had placed a small basin of water beneath a reflective surface. An attempt to redirect sunlight down a series of mirrors through shafts above ground. It was crude but brilliant, turning a few seconds of daylight into hours of dim illumination. Pinned above the table was a faded sheet of paper with a hand-drawn symbol, the same markings carved on the door. Beneath it, a single sentence. This is not to hide from the world. It's to learn how to live when it ends. Investigators realized this wasn't superstition or paranoia. It was visionary experimentation, an effort to understand how life could sustain itself underground, independent of civilization. In the corner, a small wooden box held jars of what appeared to be bioluminescent moss cultures, labeled Light Harvest. Another contained fungi samples tagged Protein Growth. Eustace wasn't preparing to escape humanity. He was studying how to preserve it. One of the inspectors whispered. He wasn't trying to survive the apocalypse. He was trying to rebuild after it. Eustace only nodded, his eyes reflecting the soft green light. This place, he said, isn't for me. It's for whoever remembers how to listen when everything else goes silent. And with that, they stepped back into the tunnel, leaving behind a room built not out of fear, but out of faith in what the earth could still teach. As investigators ventured farther into the chamber, the air thickened, the smell of oil, earth, and something faintly chemical. Against the back wall stood a series of sealed glass containers, each meticulously labeled and dated. Inside were preserved animals, frogs, snakes, and small birds suspended in amber-colored liquid. It was unsettling but strangely reverent, like a cross between a museum exhibit and a ritual. Beside the jars lay stacks of handwritten papers, detailing a project Eustace had titled Biological Continuity. The notes described experiments in preservation using natural oils, herbal compounds, and ambient soil heat instead of refrigeration. One entry read, "If nature preserves the seed through winter, man should learn to preserve life through decay." Investigators debated whether it was science or spirituality, or perhaps both. The samples weren't grotesque trophies. They were data points in a philosophy, a quest to decode the balance between death and regeneration. Several jars had already begun decomposing, releasing faint bubbles as organic matter fed bacterial cultures. Nearby sat clay pots rigged with copper coils and stones, a primitive compost heating system designed to create low, sustained warmth. In his notes, Eustace called it Earth's heartbeat, a renewable energy born of decay. It was genius in its simplicity, eerie in its devotion. Then came the most haunting discovery. A message scratched into a wooden beam above the workbench, barely legible beneath layers of dust and soot. It read, "What dies here feeds what survives." Those 6 words captured everything about Eustace Conway's experiment. A man trying to mirror nature's endless cycle of creation, consumption, and rebirth. But as investigators turned to leave, their flashlights caught something glinting in the soil near the floor. The first trace of the message carved into stone, the one that would define everything they had found below. Carved into the back wall of the chamber, just above the earthen floor, was a phrase etched with deliberate, practiced strokes. The letters were uneven, hand-chiseled, but unmistakable. The earth provides, if man remembers how to listen. The words stopped everyone in silence. They weren't just a quote. They were a warning, a manifesto, a truth buried as deeply as the room itself. For years, Eustace Conway had lived as a living contradiction. A man out of time, teaching ancient lessons to a modern world obsessed with convenience. But this inscription, revealed the core of everything he believed. It wasn't about retreating from society. It was about rebuilding the bond between humanity and the planet that sustained it. Investigators took photos, their flashlights casting long shadows across the carved letters. One described it later as standing inside a sermon written in dirt. Nearby, another phrase appeared, smaller, nearly erased by age. When they find this, I hope they understand. And they did. Suddenly, all the strange devices, the preserved animals, the quiet journals made sense. This wasn't paranoia. It was a blueprint for renewal. Eustace had built a living classroom underground. One meant not for the world of his time, but for the one that might come after it. A world forced to start again. By the time the team resurfaced, the air outside felt different, fresher, heavier with meaning. The wind through the trees seemed to echo that same message. The earth provides, if man listens. Yet one question lingered among them all. Was Eustace finished with his experiment, or was he still quietly perfecting it? The answer would come soon enough when the man himself decided to speak. When the story of the hidden chamber broke, speculation spread faster than wildfire. Some called it a survivalist bunker, others a madman's tomb. But when Eustace Conway finally addressed the rumors, his voice was calm, almost amused. "It's not a bunker," he said. "It's a mirror. It shows what we've forgotten." He explained that the chamber beneath his cabin was not meant for hiding, but for learning, a place to test the boundaries of human endurance and ecological balance. "If I can live here, under the soil, without a single plug or switch," he said, "then maybe humanity still has a chance." He had spent years descending into that underground world, recording temperature, moisture, and silence. It wasn't about escaping society. It was about proving a point that nature already has the answers, if man learns humility long enough to hear them. Investigators left Turtle Island changed. They had expected conspiracy or eccentricity. What they found was faith, not in religion, but in the earth itself. The chamber remains sealed today, preserved as Eustace's private experiment. He rarely speaks of it now, but those who visit Turtle Island say that on quiet nights, he can still be found near the cabin, lantern in hand, staring at the ground as if listening for something deep below. And maybe he is. Because what they found beneath Eustace Conway's home wasn't madness or mystery. It was proof, carved in wood, written in soil, that one man still believes we can live in harmony with the land that made us. Beneath his cabin, Eustace Conway didn't build a bunker. He built a promise, a reminder that survival isn't about running from the world. It's about remembering how to live with it